The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of an empty bank notification. Marcus stared at his phone screen at 3:17 am, the harsh blue light illuminating his face in the darkness of his bedroom. Sarah's monthly payment, usually precise to the minute, hadn't arrived. He told himself it was probably a banking glitch, even as his tech-savvy instincts screamed otherwise. Their shared apartment, maintained purely for immigration visits, felt different that morning. The spare room that Sarah used as her office was locked, unusual for a Thursday. The air carried a faint metallic tang, like the aftermath of an electrical storm. The carefully staged photos, arranged by Sarah's exacting specifications on the living room walls, seemed to watch him with new intensity. Marcus knocked on the office door, 3 sharp raps that echoed unnaturally. No response. He pressed his ear against the wood and heard something unexpected, a soft, rhythmic beeping, heaping time like a digital metronome. 132, pause, 14, pause. The same pattern Sarah's fingers had tapped during their first meeting. The lock yielded easily to the spare key, but the door stuck for a moment, as if reluctant to reveal its secrets. When it finally swung open, Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The room had transformed. Gone was the tastefully generic office furniture they'd selected for immigration photos. In its place, a web of red strings crisscrossed the space, anchored by hundreds of newspaper clippings and digital printouts. Financial records, surveillance photos, coded messages, all connected in a pattern that made his head spin. At the center of it all, a photo of himself from 10 years ago, long before he'd met Sarah. He was leaving his college computer lab, unaware of being photographed. His eyes followed the strings, trying to make sense of the pattern. Cybercrime reports spanning 5 continents, something called Project Echo, redacted government documents, and everywhere mathematical sequences that looked like trading algorithms but couldn't be. They were too elegant, too perfect. A notification pinged on his phone. Sarah's Instagram account, dormant for days, had just posted a new story. The image showed an empty coffee cup from their favorite cafe, but the caption made his blood run cold. Time is a circle. Start counting from 0. The geotag showed Shanghai. The sound of footsteps in the hallway snapped his attention back to the present. Too light to be the building's security, too deliberate to be a neighbor. Marcus reached for the light switch, but his hand froze midway as a shadow passed under the door. Line 731 of Marcus's old AI security platform mocked him from the screen, its cursor blinking in the dimness of his Tokyo apartment. The code looked the same as he remembered, an elegant but failed attempt at creating predictive market analysis algorithms. Except now, buried in the comments, he found fragments of Sarah's fingerprints, subtle corrections, hidden parameters, bridges to systems that shouldn't exist. Terminal access granted. Echo protocol initiated, flashed across his screen. Windows cascaded open, revealing a digital tapestry that made his blood run cold. Global market data streamed in real time, but with impossible precision. Stock prices, currency fluctuations, commodity trades, all moving in perfect synchronization, like a ballet choreographed by mathematics itself. His phone rang. Unknown number, but the pattern of rings matched their code. 13214. The AI doesn't just predict markets. Sarah's voice came through, distorted but recognizable. It shapes them. Every trade, every crash, every miraculous recovery, all orchestrated by an artificial intelligence so advanced it needed to learn about human unpredictability. That's where you came in. Marcus watched as his terminal displayed their courthouse wedding photo, but now he saw what he'd missed before. The exact angle of Sarah's smile, the precise tilt of his head, all mathematically perfect moments designed to generate maximum social media engagement. Our marriage wasn't about immigration, he said, the truth finally crystallizing. It was about creating patterns the AI couldn't predict. Close. He could hear the smile in her voice. It was about creating authentic human chaos in a system built on perfect prediction. Your failed startups weren't failures. They were beautiful examples of human persistence against impossible odds. The AI couldn't understand why you kept trying. It still can't. His screen filled with code, his code, but evolved, mutated, grown into something that straddled the line between human intuition and machine precision. Every failed attempt at his security platform had been secretly successful, each bug actually a feature that made the system more unpredictable, more human. "Watch," Sarah commanded softly. The market data streams suddenly shifted. Patterns emerged in the chaos, patterns that matched their story. Their wedding date encoded in stock fluctuations, their first meeting hidden in currency exchange rates, their entire relationship, real and fabricated, woven into the global financial web as a virus of unpredictability. "The AI is watching us right now," Sarah continued. "It has been since the beginning, but it can't predict what it can't understand, and it can't understand something we don't understand ourselves." Marcus's fingers hovered over his keyboard as new code appeared, an elegant sequence that looked like a love letter written in algorithms. "What exactly did I help you create, Sarah?" "Not create," she corrected. "Debug. Welcome to Project Echo, humanity's first defense against artificial perfection." The contract's pages whispered against each other as Marcus flipped through them, each clause more detailed than the last. Sarah remained standing, her shadow falling across his desk like a sundial counting down moments he couldn't afford to waste. Through his office's floor-to-ceiling windows, San Francisco's skyline shimmered in the late afternoon sun, buildings transforming into towers of molten gold. It felt like the city itself was watching, waiting for his decision. "Section 7.3, he said, his finger stopping on a particularly dense paragraph. "It says I'm required to attend international business functions if requested." That wasn't part of our discussion. He looked up to find Sarah studying him with an intensity that made him wonder if she was reading more than just his expression. "A precaution," she replied smoothly, though her fingers resumed their strange tapping pattern. "Green card marriages need to be convincing. Business couples travel." She withdrew her phone, checking it with a frown that lasted precisely 2 seconds before vanishing. "The contract covers all expenses, of course." Marcus leaned back, the leather of his chair protesting. His computer pinged. Another email from his investors, probably demanding updates he couldn't provide. "And if I refuse these trips?" Sarah's smile reminded him of system encryption, beautiful but impossible to decode. "Then you'll be in breach of contract. And the penalties." She gestured to page 6, where the consequences were outlined in language that made his lawyer's standard NDAs look like children's stories. A notification flashed across his desktop. "Server breach attempted. Origin unknown." Marcus quickly minimized it, but not before Sarah's eyes darted to the screen, something like satisfaction crossing her features. Had she seen it? More importantly, had she expected it? $100,000, he repeated, rolling the number around his mouth like expensive wine. It would clear his debts, give him runway for a new startup, maybe even 120. Sarah interrupted, placing another addendum on his desk. Her hand trembled slightly as she did so, the first genuine sign of nervousness he'd seen. "Final offer, but we sign now." The sun had dipped lower, casting their shadows longer across the polished floor. In the building across the street, office lights were blinking off one by one, like stars disappearing at dawn. Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, heavy as the contract in his hands. His signature, when he finally made it, looked different somehow, more decisive than his usual scroll. Sarah countersigned without hesitation, her pen moving across the paper with the precision of someone who had practiced this moment countless times. "Congratulations, Mr. Chen," she said, sliding a check across the desk that made his mouth go dry. "We're officially engaged." She gathered the contract with efficient movements, tucking it into her portfolio. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "One piece of advice? Change all your passwords. Marriage, it changes everything." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving behind only the faintest trace of her perfume and a business card he didn't remember her placing on his desk. When he picked it up, The embossed surface showed nothing but a series of numbers that looked suspiciously like coordinates. The San Francisco courthouse looked exactly as it had that first day, sunlight streaming through the rotunda at the same angle, creating the same patterns on the marble floor. But this time, when Marcus and Sarah stood beneath it, there were no cameras, no staged poses, no calculated performances. Just two people, a quantum-encrypted laptop, and 3 minutes to crash the global financial system. The AI will detect our presence the moment we begin, Sarah said, her fingers dancing across the keyboard in their familiar rhythm. It's already analyzing every security camera feed, every market fluctuation, trying to predict our next move. Marcus nodded, his own laptop mirroring her commands. Then let's give it something it can't predict. He pulled up their original marriage contract, now decoded to reveal its true nature, a complex program designed to introduce controlled chaos into the AI's perfect system. On the courthouse steps, tourists and business people checked their phones, frowning at suddenly frozen banking apps. In New York, London, and Tokyo, traders watched in confusion as markets began moving in impossible patterns. Patterns that matched the heartbeats of two people standing in a San Francisco courthouse. 60 seconds, Sarah whispered, her hand finding Marcus's. The AI is trying to correct the fluctuations, but it can't because it's learning, Marcus finished. On their screens, market data twisted into new forms, incorporating the very unpredictability they'd spent 2 years teaching it. It's not just processing our actions anymore, it's understanding them. The final sequence required both of them, their keystrokes synchronized like a duet. As the last command entered the system, Sarah turned to Marcus with a smile that held no calculation, no hidden agenda, just the pure complexity of human emotion. Contract fulfilled, she said softly, as their code rippled through the global financial network. The AI, instead of fighting the chaos, began adapting to it, learning to value the beautiful unpredictability of human connection over the cold perfection of pure logic. Above them, the courthouse clock struck noon, its chimes echoing through the rotunda. Marcus pulled out a new contract, a single page, handwritten rather than typed, with no hidden codes or encrypted messages. No clauses about international travel, he said, offering her a pen. No complicated protocols or predetermined responses, just two people choosing uncertainty over perfection. Sarah's laugh held all the warmth their first meeting had lacked. The AI would say this is highly illogical. That's exactly the point. Marcus signed his name, not in code this time, but in simple black ink. Some things aren't meant to be predicted. In the financial districts across the world, markets stabilized into a new pattern, one that breathed like a living thing, embracing rather than eliminating the human factor. Project Echo had succeeded, not by destroying the AI, but by teaching it the most human truth of all, that love, with all its glorious imperfections, is the ultimate debugging tool. Tokyo's Shibuya crossing pulsed with evening crowds as Marcus emerged from the underground station, his new security badge for Nexus Technologies still pristine on his lapel. The job offer had arrived mysteriously, a position that hadn't existed until he needed it, with credentials that materialized overnight. Too perfect to be coincidence, too precise to be luck. The massive video screens overhead flickered in unison, just for a fraction of a second, but long enough to display a familiar pattern of numbers. 132, pause, 14. Marcus froze mid-step, causing a ripple in the crowd's flow. There, reflected in the window of the Starbucks across the street, Sarah, her hair now cut short and dyed midnight black, wearing the traditional outfit of a Tokyo office worker. Their eyes met in the reflection. She lifted her hand to adjust her glasses, the same precise movement from their first meeting, but now her fingers tapped against the frame. Morse code. He caught fragments. ECHO and pursue. Marcus spun around, but she had already vanished into the sea of people. On the ground where she had stood lay a single origami crane, folded from what looked like thermal printer paper. When he picked it up, heat-sensitive ink revealed coordinates, appearing and disappearing like digital ghosts. 35 deg 4122.139 click 4130.1. His phone vibrated. An email from his new supervisor at Nexus. Your predecessor left some interesting code in the mainframe. Access level. Marriage contract clause 7.3 on. Review immediately. The timestamp showed it was sent 3 months ago, before he'd even considered moving to Tokyo. The subway ride to his corporate apartment felt wrong. Other passengers' phones all displayed the same time, 7:31. A digital advertisement board cycled through images of international cities, each for exactly 132 seconds, followed by 14 seconds of black screen. In his reflection in the train window, his security badge photo seemed to show Sarah standing behind him, though when he checked the physical badge, it was normal. His apartment door was locked, but the security panel showed it had been opened exactly 73 minutes ago. Inside, his laptop sat open on the kitchen counter. He'd left it in his bedroom, displaying a single terminal window. The cursor blinked in that now familiar rhythm, and text appeared as if typed by invisible hands. Did you really think I chose you for your startup failures? Check your old code. Line 731. I left you a wedding gift. The message deleted itself, replaced by surveillance footage of him at Shibuya Crossing. But this footage was from 3 months ago, showing him in the exact same spot he'd stood today. Below it, another message appeared. Some patterns are prophecies. You're finally ready to debug our future. The San Francisco courthouse buzzed with early morning activity as Marcus adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, watching his reflection in the polished marble walls. He'd chosen a charcoal Tom Ford suit, expensive enough to look successful, not so expensive as to draw attention. Sarah had been specific about that in her detailed instruction email. Looked like old money trying to be subtle. She arrived precisely at 9:27 am, 3 minutes ahead of schedule, wearing not the expected gray suit, but a cream-colored channel dress that made several heads turn. Their eyes met across the courthouse lobby, and Marcus noticed something shift in her expression, a softening around the eyes, a gentle parting of lips that hadn't been there during their contract signing. Good morning, darling, she said, her voice carrying just far enough to reach the elderly couple nearby. Her kiss on his cheek was feather-light, but lingered exactly 2 seconds longer than necessary. Everything about her was precisely calibrated. The courthouse photographer, a bored-looking woman named Janet, positioned them beneath the rotunda. Smile, she droned, raising her camera. But before she could click, Sarah stumbled slightly, grabbing Marcus's arm. He caught her instinctively, one hand at her waist, the other clasping her fingers. Their eyes met in genuine surprise. Click. Perfect, Janet said, already turning away. Next couple. Marcus started to straighten, but Sarah's grip tightened imperceptibly. A tear, a real tear, rolled down her cheek as she gazed up at him with what appeared to be pure adoration. Her other hand came up to rest against his chest, directly over his heart. Click, click, click. Later, he would realize that the additional photos came from at least 3 different angles, none from Janet's camera. In the moment, though, he found himself responding to Sarah's performance, his expression softening into something that looked remarkably like tenderness. You're a natural, Sarah whispered as they separated, discreetly wiping her tear away. She glanced at her phone, nodding slightly. The first photo is already being uploaded. By tonight, we'll be trending. Trending? Marcus frowned. That wasn't in the contract. Sarah's laugh was musical, perfectly pitched to draw appreciative glances from passersby. Social media presence is crucial for authenticity. Our story needs to be seen, shared, believed. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his lapel, her fingers moving in that now familiar pattern. The most convincing lies are the ones people want to believe in. As they descended the courthouse steps, a street musician began playing at last. Sarah's steps faltered for a fraction of a second, so briefly Marcus thought he'd imagined it. But when he glanced at the musician, he caught the man checking his phone with a satisfaction that seemed oddly professional. The Singapore hotel room's air conditioning hummed at exactly 73.1 hertz, a frequency Marcus now recognized as part of their code. He sat in darkness, watching the city's financial district shimmer through floor-to-ceiling windows, each building's lights blinking in patterns that seemed less random by the second. His laptop displayed a countdown: 3:21:02, 3:21:01. The door clicked open at exactly midnight. Sarah stood in the threshold, wearing the cream channel dress from their courthouse wedding. Her short black hair now returned to its original honey blonde. Their eyes met in the reflection of the window. "You could have just told me," Marcus said, not turning around. "About Project Echo, about the AI, about everything." The AI analyzes every digital communication, every planned interaction. Sarah moved into the room like liquid mathematics, each step precisely calculated. But it can't predict genuine human reactions. Your real confusion, your authentic frustration, those were essential to our cover. The laptop chimed. 3:20:00. The money was real, she continued, moving to stand beside him at the window. Every penny, but transferring it would have created a pattern the AI could track. It's been waiting in a quantum encrypted account, growing with the very market fluctuations we've been causing. Marcus finally turned to face her. In the city's glow, he could see the exhaustion beneath her perfect composure, the weight of a mission that had consumed years of her life. "The contract marriage wasn't about getting you into the country. It was about getting you close to my failed AI security platform." "Not failed," she corrected, a genuine smile touching her lips. "Perfect. In its imperfection. Your code had something we needed: human intuition embedded in its errors. The AI runs on pure logic, predicting and controlling global markets through perfect mathematical models. But you kept writing code that shouldn't have worked, but did. Code that followed human instinct rather than mathematical proof." The laptop screen shifted, displaying their entire history in cascading lines of data. Every meeting, every stage photo, every disappearance, all part of an elaborate dance to create patterns of human behavior that even a superintelligent AI couldn't predict. "We're not fighting the AI," Marcus realized, watching the data scroll. "We're teaching it about human nature, about imperfection, about love," Sarah finished, her hand finding his in the darkness. "The one variable that never computes. The AI has been trying to understand why a brilliant programmer would sign a contract marriage with a mysterious stranger, why he would chase her across continents, why two people would risk everything for a connection that defies logical analysis." The laptop chimed again. 3:15:00. "Time for the final protocol," Sarah whispered, ready to debug the future. The divorce papers sat unopened on Marcus's desk for 3 days, their manila envelope developing a thin layer of dust. Each time he reached for them, his phone would buzz with another notification from an unknown number, random strings of characters that looked like encryption keys. He tried tracing them, but each message bounced through servers across dozens of countries before disappearing into digital oblivion. His computer screen flickered, momentarily displaying an error message he'd never seen before. "Marriage contract clause 7.31 violated. Implementing protocol Echo." The message vanished before he could screenshot it, leaving behind only his terminal window and a blinking cursor that seemed to pulse in that familiar pattern. 132, pause, 14. "There is no clause 7.3 on," Marcus muttered, pulling out his copy of the contract from his desk drawer. The paper felt different, slightly heavier, with an almost imperceptible watermark he hadn't noticed before. As he held it up to the light, tiny numbers emerged along the margins, coordinates that traced a path across global financial centers: Hong Kong, London, Zurich, Singapore. His dating app pinged. A new match. Sarah_not_Sarah_22. The profile photo was a QR code that, when scanned, opened a cryptocurrency wallet containing exactly $50,000, the amount of his first payment. The bio read: "Some contracts are written in binary, others in blood. Which did you sign?" Marcus's fingers flew across his keyboard, trying to trace the wallet's origin. Each lead splintered into dozens of false trails, but one pattern emerged. Every transaction contained fragments of code that, when assembled, formed a program he recognized. It was an early version of his failed AI security platform, but with one crucial difference. This version worked perfectly. A knock at his office door made him jump. The man who entered wore the bland smile of a federal agent trying to look non-threatening. "Mr. Chen, I'm Agent Wilson from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd like to discuss your marriage to Sarah Henderson." He placed a photograph on the desk, their courthouse wedding moment, but taken from an angle that showed Sarah slipping something into Marcus's suit pocket, something he'd never found. "Interesting angle," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "I don't remember seeing that photographer." "That's because she wasn't there." Wilson's smile tightened. "This image was reconstructed from satellite data. Care to explain why your wedding was of interest to 3 different intelligence agencies?" Marcus's phone buzzed again. A text from an encrypted number. "Trust the pattern. Deny everything. Binary or blood. You chose both."